Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hello, happy Thursday. Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or via podcast, wherever you do that. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. So it's been a long time since we've had a conversation or even dabbled into discussing the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility, aka Cop City, which, according to the mayor in a press conference yesterday, should be near completion, at least ready for what he called a ribbon cutting by the end of the year. The only problem is those who sought to stop the facility from being constructed submitted petitions, at least 116,000 signatures, we are told, to halt construction. And because the city of Atlanta has been fighting even the verification of those petitions to get a petition question on the ballot, that's all gummed up in court and construction continues. So there is palpable frustration from opponents of the facility, obviously, and some of those who are opposed to the facility have likely been radicalized over time because they see an issue that they're trying or have tried, public discourse, peaceful protests, appearing at city council in overwhelming numbers, and then a petition drive, a legal means to put a referendum question on the ballot, either ignored or stonewalled. First, let me give you some of Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens and APD Chief Darren Shearbaum's press conference from yesterday, with some commentary sprinkled in.
All right, good afternoon. Standing with me today is our police chief, Darren Shearbaum, our fire chief, Rod Smith, and we have leadership from the ATF and FBI alongside me. Atlanta is the cradle of the civil rights movement and holds a significant place in history for nonviolent protest. And I strongly support standing against injustice and the right to protest. What we've been seeing lately is not a protest for equality, but a way to vandalize our communities. These continuous acts are not about advocating for equality. They are about vandalism and about destruction.
Well, that's a silly statement. Obviously, the vandalism is occurring from those who are protesting a public safety training facility being built that they have collected signatures for to halt construction of, for environmental means, or for halting the perceived over-policing, the over-militarization of our domestic police forces.
And this destruction is happening in Atlanta and around the metro Atlanta region. Pretty soon we're going to show you images from Henry County, Fayette County, to other places in the area. We witness these individuals continuously exploit the construction of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center as a way to commit acts of violence against whether that be a youth center, whether that be a hospital that's adjacent to a small college, whether that's affordable housing development, or our fire equipment, police equipment, motorcycles, as well as against horse stables.
Again, I'm going to point out, I don't agree with the characterization that folks are just committing these acts just because that's what they want to do, or that they're using the Stop Cop City movement to be able to scratch an itch, you know? And again, I'll go on the record. I'm not really in favor of destruction of property or any sort of perceived violent means of protest. In fact, we've had on this show frequently a senior legal analyst with the Stop Cop City movement or the Cop City Vote movement, Alex Joseph, and I posed this question to her about these sort of acts and how it sort of plays out in the court of public opinion. This was her back on February 1st. The destruction of property. Chaining yourself to equipment's one thing, but burning equipment owned by privately owned construction companies, it does give. Do you understand where that might actually create some issue, I guess, when it comes to owning the narrative a little bit or winning over public sentiment?
Oh, absolutely. I understand why public sentiment may question the destruction of property. And I think at one point, months ago, years ago, I myself questioned that. Okay. But now, having been deep in the movement, having put on suits and gone to City Hall and done the polite white girl thing and really gotten no response, I will say I certainly have anger deep inside of me. And also, I will say that two things are happening here that have to be acknowledged. One is, we have all said out loud, we have had the longest public comment at City Hall ever in the history of Atlanta. We said this is an unpopular project, and they are ignoring us. In the same way, if you're raising kids and your kids keep reaching for the cookies, you move the cookies, right? Like, why are we building this unpopular project in an unpopular place? Right. Two, a little bit of the promise of the facility and of the fact that Atlanta police currently receive over 40% of the Atlanta budget is that they make us safer, right? And to me, it is telling that they have been unable to prevent any of this destruction of property, right? And so to me, this is really showing that the destruction of property is not turning me off from the Cop City movement. It is showing me that this is an unpopular project, and they, meaning the city, has refused to listen to our voices about that. And that the cops, in fact, cannot prevent crimes no matter how well funded they are. And so I think that if they had listened to us, the destruction of property would have stopped, and they really just refused to do so. And I also will say it is state violence to destroy the largest force in the Atlanta area. It is state violence to ruin Black homeowners' property values with the creation of this facility that's going to have nonstop noise pollution. And so I just think we should look at how we define violence.
So again, that conversation was from Thursday, February 1st with senior legal analyst Alex Joseph, who, what did she use? The term polite white girl. She was the polite white girl and constantly being ignored, not just her, but the entire Stop Cop City or Cop City Vote movement being ignored, being stonewalled, being obstructed from the peaceful means of protesting, from participation in the democratic process, has somewhat radicalized her, and I'm sure countless others. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy then by Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens and the Atlanta Police Foundation and the APD as an extension then to radicalize their opposition and then head to a press conference to point out how radicalized the opposition is. And by the way, if the protesters are listening, hey man, don't mess with the horses. They're just animals. Okay, let's give you a little bit more of that press conference from yesterday.
They do not want Atlanta to have safety. They do not want Metro Atlanta to have safety. They do not care about peace or about our communities. And these acts of destruction must end. They must stop. These are not MLK versions of peaceful, nonviolent protest. To the contrary, these are arsons, vandals, they are destructive, and they have committed violence against the people of Atlanta and the Metro Atlanta region. There have been almost, or just beyond, 24 acts of arson or vandalism. And I'm grateful to our law enforcement partners for being there in the need to respond. These individuals have vandalized construction equipment that folks were going to go to work that morning. When those individuals can't work, they can't feed their families. These individuals have caused over $10 million worth of construction damage and property damage across the Metro Atlanta area. And that's to equipment that is belonging to private organizations and companies. On and on, this act of violence must cease. And one instance, if you think about the crane incident that happened a few weeks back, these individuals, some of them climbed up on a crane, some 100+ feet in the air, and then they needed APD and AFRD. They needed our fire rescue department and our police department to get them down while they were protesting our fire rescue department and police department. The irony here can't be missed. And then individuals later on would go on to commit more acts of violence throughout our Metro Atlanta region. But here's the newsflash. The training center is well on its way during this construction cycle.
See, to me, this is unnecessary. This is like, You like apples? How you like them apples? It's very gloaty. And again, no mention of the city's fervent efforts to stonewall and obstruct the peaceful part of the protest movement, the ballot initiative, 116,000 signatures that they're sitting in possession of. That's right, those ballots are sitting in the city's possessions and signatures aren't being verified. And if they can't be verified, how can the ballot initiative wind up on a referendum in November? I mean, can we not all agree that this seems to be an effort to just run out the clock, to just erode any pushback whatsoever, because the air of inevitability is covering the conversation like a blanket of fog?
We will continue to construct the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, and we will complete it during this year. We are well on our way. Construction is happening each and every day. We're moving forward as planned, and we're not allowing the distractions to stop us, to deter us from creating a nation-leading 21st century public safety training center for firefighters, EMS, for police, and for the community to enjoy. They're learning anti-bias training, de-escalation techniques, proportionality, even how to deal with mental health challenges, as well as our public works department gets to train out there, our parks and recreation. All of the equipment operators for the city of Atlanta will learn how to drive and be safe on our training course.
I mean, Mr. Mayor, that all sounds cool, but the PR effort, it seems like it's a little late in the game for the public relations spin on this, when we've been discussing this for more than a year now, and there's been very little dialogue or even invitation for dialogue. And when there is invitation for dialogue, obviously with city council meetings that go on for hours with hundreds of folks speaking out, there just doesn't seem to be any acceptance or recognition of that dialogue.
All of these things are happening because we need them. The city of Atlanta has all these, the training centers that we currently have are condemned. The fire training facility, condemned. The police training facility, condemned. So new fire recruits, new police officers, and veteran officers have to receive ongoing training so that we can keep this city safe and to keep the people of this city safe.
Which begs the question, if those facilities were condemned, what's going to happen with this new facility in, say, 20 or 30 years? Are we going to look back and see $120 million spent and forest deforested, and then have another mayor say, well, you know, that facility's been condemned. It's time to raise another section of trees and build another one.
So I say to you once again, to the community members of the city of Atlanta and throughout the region, that these individuals are not peaceful protesters. They are violent actors having arson, vandalism, destruction as their main set of acts. These are not peaceful protesters, and I want the community to be well aware of what we're dealing with.
That's right. These people that the city and the mayor and the Atlanta Police Foundation and APD have ignored in this entire conversation and in this process, the ballot initiative, the referendum they're now radicalized. I want you to know what we're dealing with. I mean, does he not understand his own role in the radicalization? All right, we'll take a quick break, come back. There's some Q&A from the media after that when The Ron Show returns. Back after this. At RonShowATL.com, by the way, there are past episodes of this show where we have spoken with the aforementioned Alex Joseph, who works with the Cop City Vote movement as a legal analyst. She was a former state and federal prosecutor as well. I mean, she kind of knows what she's talking about. And again, she is someone who you heard in the last segment talked about, you know, somewhat being radicalized by being ignored, by not being taken seriously as a protest movement who tried the peaceful protest avenue and were largely rebuffed and ignored. We have spoken with the South River Watershed Alliance Executive Director, Dr. Jackie Eccles, about the environmental impact. We have talked on this show for nearly a year and a half now about the reasons there are pushback efforts for the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility, and they've all been. Dr. Jackie Eccles is the nicest, sweetest, most docile, peace-loving woman there is, and she's hit her cap too. She last time she was on, she sounded wholly different from the first time I had her on the show. She's angry, and the anger is palpable. I mean, I'm not saying she's not out there setting fire to construction equipment, because, again, I don't advocate for that, and I know she doesn't either. But the frustration is palpable when the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility continues to be constructed while the efforts to go through the peaceful means of protest are being ignored or stonewalled. When I was messaging Alex Joseph this morning to see if she could come on the show, she could not, by the way, very busy morning. She said the court cases have been stalled. They're just waiting on a court's ruling. She believes that they're going to win, but here's exactly what she said. What does it mean to win a year after the fact? So there were questions after the press conference. The media got to ask some questions. I thought some of them were interesting to listen to the questions and then the responses. Let's do that.
You mentioned the $10 million in damages. Who is reimbursing the construction companies and the contractors that are feeding this $10 million in damages?
So the $10 million number is a combination of private company assets that have been destroyed or destructed or in some way damaged, as well as even our own police equipment, motorcycles, etc. If you remember, motorcycles were destroyed, and other pieces of equipment, a police car in front of a person's house in a community where folks have been walking their dog or taking a walk. Even those acts are counted up in that total of $10 million plus. It's more than $10 million. We're trying to get a hold of what the accurate number is, but there is no reimbursement. There is no check that we're cutting to the construction companies for this. There's, if a police motorcycle is destroyed, we have to buy another. If there's a police vehicle that's destroyed, we have to buy another. And when I say we are the people of Atlanta.
116,000 or so, who, by the way, signed a ballot referendum petition.
Certainly early on, there was some public support for some of these groups. Can you talk about that and how this has not just been trying to get the individuals who are committing these crimes, but also try to win back some hearts and minds of some people that may have been convinced by these groups?
Yeah, the good news about being the mayor of Atlanta, being born and raised here, and being duly elected about 3 times, I can tell you that these are not the people that the community supports. The community supports individuals that are looking out for their best interests. The community supports individuals that are building up youth centers, not folks that are arsoning or vandalizing youth centers. The community supports individuals who are building hospitals and not individuals that are tearing down hospitals or attempting to vandalize a church in our community or vandalize people's homes or property or businesses. So while there may seem like someone has told us that there's some community support, the community support is not for vandalism, it's not for destruction, it's not for arson, it's not for police cars being burned up in their neighborhood or for horses being let out of stables. This is anarchism. This is arson. And we have laws on the books for that the community supports.
So I have to point out that while the mayor has gone through, he said, 3 elections, both at city council and running for mayor, he never got 116,000 votes. The petition drive has 116,000 signatures. Now, I'm not saying that all of those signatures are valid, but there's still a lot more signatures on that petition drive than he ever got while running for elected office. Not saying that they are co-signing to arson and violence, of course, but he keeps talking about the people of Atlanta, and meanwhile, he's been largely ignoring about 1/3 of the people of Atlanta who are registered to vote in the city, and then holds a press conference to talk about how exasperated he is that these folks have resorted to violence.
These protesters keep saying that they don't see property damage as equivalent to what they see as bad policing across the country. And they're sort of trying to send a message. Is there any way to reason with them, or how do you respond to? I don't even know if it's fair to say that's just a false equivalency, but I don't think they see it that way. Is there a way to reason with that?
Yeah, our conversation today isn't to try to reason with the unreasonable.
Who made them unreasonable is the point all along. That's the thing I'm trying to say here. It's not that, again, and not going to co-sign or endorse any sort of violence or destruction of property here, but who made them unreasonable, Mr. Mayor?
In terms of, you guys are saying that the protests are obviously what they're doing is way over the top with vandalism and destruction. What would you recommend they do to voice their displeasure for the construction? I don't know who wants to handle that. I mean, what would you tell people right now? What would you rather see them do to tell you that they don't think you guys should do this?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Tyler. I would say that there are individuals that have voiced their concerns directly with us. We've had meetings. People have actually added their input so that we can improve what happens at the site. Remember, there have been 2 distinctive groups We have the citizen group that are neighbors around the site. They provide input, and they still meet monthly or quarterly. All of their recommendations we have added to the site. And then we had the task force that we put together last year of a larger community of about 40 individuals. They provided their input then, and they still have access to us now. So what I say is, individuals that want to say, hey, let's do something in addition to this, or here's an idea that I have, or here's some constructive feedback, it's called democracy, and it's called being engaged citizens. And that's why we have all these processes for community input. I sat in meetings in the mayor's office. I sat in meetings in communities. Chief Shearbaughman sat in meetings, whether that's in his office or at college campuses, etc. There's a meaningful, very productive way to have these conversations. City Council is open to these conversations as well.
Wow.
And there's, we've had conversations with large stakeholders as well as individual, singular people. And so I say that to say that the community voice is being received on an ongoing frequency.
I'm sorry. It's well chronicled that the community voice has been received and then largely ignored and sitting in boxes waiting to be verified. This is The Ron Show, and we're back after this.
Want to be on the show? Have a cause or campaign you'd like to speak up for? Email Ron at ronshowatl.com or call 404-919-2725. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So I'm going to do something I don't often do because I don't like commingling what it is that I do with my time. And that happens to be this podcast, of course, weekday mornings. We air 9 to 10 on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com. Then we go on demand all day, ProgressiveVoices.com, and of course via podcast as well. But I'm also a residential real estate agent, a realtor. RonOnTheReal.com, by the way. RonOnTheReal.com. REAL. Here in Metro Atlanta, I'm showing houses, and for those who are looking to buy, those who even are looking to rent. And it's the working with both of those type of customers and or clients that really kind of tunes me into the frustration that exists from those who would like to buy, but really are in no position to. And not even because they don't qualify credit-wise or that they haven't set aside money to do so. It's just that it's like the horse with the carrot on the stick in front of the face. The carrot isn't getting any closer. In fact, it seems to be getting further and further away for a lot of these folks. I got this in when I say there are things that that I don't normally do here. I don't normally just read an email from someone I work with, but I'm going to read this email from someone I work with. He happens to be a mortgage broker, a mortgage lender here. I'll just leave his name. Just Randy. I'll just tell you it's Randy. It's my friend Randy, who, by the way, helped me and some clients go under contract on a house that they're going to be buying in an established neighborhood in Southwest Atlanta. I'm very excited for them. A nice young couple buying a house that has been through some renovations, and it's great to see. In fact, they're moving into a home where they are bracketed on either side by older homeowners. This is the sort of thing, by the way, that exists. There are programs, and they're not using it, but there are programs that exist, grants and down payment assistance, programs that exist to help bring in younger families into established neighborhoods with older residents. It's a fantastic thing. If you want to ask more about that, or if that's something that sounds ideal to you. And listen, if I were going to be starting a new family and moving into a neighborhood, I would want to move into an established neighborhood with some older residents. By the way, I mean, that's just a fantastic way to live because you get a little built-in family there once you get to know them. It's nice to have Miss So-and-so living next door. In my neighborhood, across the street from us, it was Miss Dallas. Miss Dallas was a widowed lady who, by the way, she and I were like, we were best friends. Like I was 12 and she was obviously not. But she used to like to take me to Augusta College basketball games because nobody in Grovetown wanted to go see Augusta College basketball games. Miss Dallas was like, "You got tickets? Yeah, let's go." And she would take me. Anyway, Miss Dallas was a wonderful friend. Anyway, that is an ideal situation for a young couple or a family, a young family kind of starting out in their first home to move into to established neighborhood. And there are programs that exist to sort of help revitalize neighborhoods by bringing in those younger families. Anyway, if you have questions about that, don't hesitate to ask me. I'd love to set you up with something similar to what we did for the young couple that is moving in next month. Randy and I worked on this. Anyway, Randy sent an email out to I'm sure everybody on his database here. Housing starts, construction, and completions are all down year over year, Randy writes. If you recall, we built about the same number of homes between 2010 and 2020 as we did between 1960 and 1970. The problem with that is we have almost double the population. With inventory looking like it's going to be in short supply for the next few years, pressure on home pricing is likely to continue. Read into that. That means houses are going to continue to get more expensive because anybody who sat through an economics class in high school knows the tug and pull and push of supply and demand. Randy continues, even with the headwinds of higher rates, affordability is becoming a bigger factor and may help keep pricing in check. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. Keeping pricing in check is kind of hard when, again, the supply is limited, but the demand is high. He showed some new construction year over year from March 23 to March 2024 numbers. We're off by 4.3% month over month on permits. We're up a little bit year over year, 1.5%. But on construction starts, we're off by 14.7% month over month and down 4.3% year over year. We're down on actual construction month over month and year over year by 2%. Completions, this is bad. We're down by 13.5% month over month and down by nearly 4% year over year. And then when you pivots to the rates, he writes, when bond prices go down, rates go up. The big red candlestick he circles in the chart below shows that what happened after the inflation report came out last Wednesday. Inflation came in hotter than expected, and now the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, is saying we might not have any rate cuts this year. Randy asks, higher for how longer? With gas prices, home prices, and rental rates all on the rise, it looks like inflation may be around longer than expected. The end game, of course, is lower inflation, which will most likely come from a slower economy. With all the global turmoil, it's hard to predict when the slowdown will happen. But when it does, it will most likely be accompanied by lower interest rates. Randy writes, with home prices on the rise, it still makes financial sense to buy sooner rather than later. The old adage still holds, marry the house, date the rate. I wanted to read that email because, not because I'm trying to convince anybody to buy a house. I can't put a gun to your head and say, I don't care how much money you think you do have or don't have. Don't worry about the. But I do tell prospective buyers, listen, if you've got the means to buy a house, you kind of have to ignore the rate. Like if you need to buy a house, if you have to buy a house, then yeah, ignore the rate. I can't tell you that rates are going to come down. I can't predict that. I'd like to think in the next year to 3 that we're going to get back into, I don't know, the 4s, 5s, maybe the low 6s. I mean, how optimistic is that? But I am saying that if you need to buy a house, if you have to buy a house, or not, if you're in a position where you can buy a house and you're going to be somewhere for 3 to 5 years or 10 or longer, then yes, stop wasting your money on rent. The landlords are going to continue raising their prices because as inflation hits us all, they're looking for ways to negate that, and they're going to pass that on to the renter. And the renter has nobody really to pass that on to, except retail and manufacturing, which is why I go back to what I said last week when the March inflation numbers came out. Maybe the Fed just needs to start accepting the fact that the monthly inflation numbers that we just seem to be staying in the low to mid 3s, maybe that's the soft landing that they've been looking for, and they're just not willing to accept it. And maybe it's time to. Now, in 2020, we were going through a presidential election with an incumbent president who was pressuring the Federal Reserve to lower rates because it would have been advantageous for him economically with, the dumpster fire that the economy was by then to do so. And I'm not looking at Fed Chairman Jerome Powell and saying, well, you should do this because it's an election year. I'm saying you should do this because if you're looking to avoid a recession, I think now's the time to start dealing with the rates, bringing them down. And I'm going to try and speak here just a little bit because even I have to do it to myself. the Fed sets the rate that they loan money to the other institutions, the banks, the credit card companies, mortgage lenders, et cetera, and so on. And of course, those institutions pad it a little bit because they like making a profit, right? They pad that number a little bit. So what the Fed sets its rate at, in the fives right now, the other institutions add to it. And so they have a little wiggle room, but they don't have that much wiggle room, not as much as the Fed does. I surmise that at some point, because we see that Americans are living on their credit cards a lot more than they have historically in a long time, that at some point they're going to hit their threshold. Your Amex is going to get maxed out. Your credit card's going to get maxed out. Your Visa is going to be topped out. And then what are you going to do? You're going to start cutting back. Or maybe even as you just approach it, you're going to start cutting back. And the interest payments alone are what's going to eat into your money, like your actual money, not your credit, but your actual money. And then you're going to have to start cutting back. When you start cutting back, retail has to start cutting back. Manufacturing for what retail stocks has to start cutting back. And then what happens? When I say starts cutting back, I'm not talking about advertising. I'm not talking about how many Christmas lights they string up. I'm talking about jobs. And when jobs start getting shed, the folks who had those jobs really have to start cutting back. And so we wind up ignoring the soft landing that I think we're apparently at, and we skip right ahead to the recession that seems inevitable if the Fed doesn't do something about it. And while we're at it, as Randy's email pointed out, between 2010 and 2020, we were building roughly the same number of houses we were between 1960 and 1970. Well, the country's population has grown by 150% since then? I'm guesstimating. I'm not going to stop the show to look that up, but I'm guessing 150%, 120, 150%, somewhere in that realm. We have more than twice as, we have about twice as many. You know what? I am going to stop and look it up. Hang on. Okay, so I did look it up. We had 203 million people in 1970. We had 329 million in 2020. That is 162%. Boy, was that close or what? I mean, just pull that out, right? Y'all, I said 150%, 162%. The population has grown since then. So we should be seeing not as many homes being built between 2010 and 2020 and 1960 and 1970. We should see in that 2010-2020 timeframe that we were building 160% as many homes as we were building back then. So we're off, and we've stayed off. We've been off since 2008, the housing crisis then. We've been, in fact, we did not catch up before the pandemic kicked in, and then, of course, the pandemic kicked in, and they paused home building then because nobody's going to be looking at houses in a pandemic, and the economy's in the tank. So we're not going to build anything, and that's them being defensive or self-defense. They don't want to buy the supplies to build houses if they're worried that nobody's going to buy the house, and then they're on the hook and going under themselves as home builders. I'm wondering at what point in time when the White House is going to see this as the problem that I, as a real estate agent, already know it to be. Well, we don't have enough housing for the people that want to buy houses. And a lot of folks just wind up being relegated to, I guess I have to rent. This happened in 2021 and 2022 when the rates were great. They were in the 2s and the 3s, and folks who just didn't have the excess income to outbid everybody else who was trying to buy. Institutional iBuyers as well, by the way, the shadow corporations that are buying companies and are buying homes and then holding on to them, renting them out, and then selling them in 3 to 5 years, grabbing that equity that a family could have been earning themselves. I don't know when the White House is going to see this problem and go, you know what, we've got to do a moonshot sort of thing. What sort of program they could conceive of to put together that gives home builders the assurances that build the houses, get them up. We need a 5-year plan to get caught up on the housing needs for this country. And I know, every state has their own building codes and regulations and economic impact and yada, yada, yada. And that's all got to be navigated. It's different in California than it is in Florida or Georgia, where obviously we're like, trees, tear them down. Let's clear cut and build a subdivision. I mean, counties have their regulations. It's a myriad of red tape. I get that. But still, there needs to be, in my mind anyway, this we got to do something about this. This is a crisis, and it's only going to get worse if we don't deal with it. And we don't even know what's around the corner. Say this recession does kick in. Home builders are again going to slow down what they're doing and put the brakes on building. And there needs to be some sort of, I don't know, a safety net. Hey, listen, I know you could conceive of another slowdown coming, but Uncle Sam's got your back. Just keep building. Just build. I don't know what that program is. I'm not the HUD secretary. And I go and look this up, and we have an acting secretary. What happened? Why do we only have an acting secretary? But we need something. And I'm not saying we, the real estate industry. I'm saying we, the people. We need something. We need something that will prod, will goad, will push home builders to build homes. And they need some assurances that even if there is a looming slowdown or something we can't even conceive of, we didn't see COVID coming, right? Well, not all of us. The home building industry needs some assurances. The home construction industry needs some assurances that no matter what, we've got to go for this next 5-year plan. Maybe it's a decade. I don't know how long it'll take to get caught up. But we need something that gives them the assurances that damn the torpedoes, storm the gates, right? Build houses because the American people need it. There needs to be that, I keep calling it the moonshot program, because Kennedy, made the pronouncement in the early 1960s, we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, and damn if we didn't, right? That's what the American people need right now. And whether it's politically advantageous or not, and I happen to think it is, it's time for somebody to start talking about it, because I'm getting rather anxious, not just as a real estate agent, but as an American who sees the numbers and knows the numbers don't work, that nobody in Washington's paying attention to this. And I'd prefer if my party did. In the home stretch for the Thursday Ron Show, and thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app between 9 and 10 a.m., AmericaOneRadio.com. We replay 5 to 6 p.m. as well, by the way, in case you are just catching up and you're like, oh, God, I missed it. Or if you want to listen to the whole thing now, well, fine. It's on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com. We also podcast this usually later in the afternoon, like after the replay, et cetera, and so on. Or you can listen at RonShowATL.com. President Bill Clinton's labor secretary is Robert Reich, and he's so well-informed, obviously, on all things economics. He released a video the other day that talked about inflation. It's something we've been hand-wringing about for quite a while now. But he's also quick to point out that what drives inflation is, in large part, corporate profits. It's something that not a lot of folks want to talk about, left or right. Dr. Reich is very much a progressive, a Bernie progressive, if you ask me. It seemed pretty evident that he was looking more towards Bernie Sanders than Hillary Clinton in 2016, which is interesting because he worked for Bill Clinton. But I'm just speculating there a little bit. Anyway, Dr. Robert Reich released this via social media last week.
Paradox. Inflation is dropping, but prices aren't coming down.
Yep.
How can this be? Because corporations have enough monopoly power to keep them high. Mm-hmm. Here's just one example that'll make you fizz. Pepsi. In 2021, PepsiCo, which makes all sorts of drinks and snacks, announced it was forced to raise prices due to higher costs.
Forced?
Really? The company reported $11 billion in profit that year. In 2023, PepsiCo's chief financial officer said that even though inflation was dropping, its prices would not. Pepsi hiked its prices by double digits and announced plans to keep them high in 2024.
Consumers generally look at our products and say, you know what, they are worth paying a little bit more for.
How can they get away with this? Well, if Pepsi were challenged by tougher competition, consumers would just buy something cheaper. But PepsiCo's only major soda competitor is Coca-Cola, which, surprise, surprise, announced similar price hikes at about the same time as Pepsi, and also kept its prices high in 2023. The CEO of Coca-Cola claimed that the company had earned the right to push price hikes because its sodas are popular. Popular? The only thing that's popular these days seems to be price gouging. We're seeing this pattern across much of the economy, especially with groceries. Inflation is down. You see, the rate of inflation measures how quickly prices are rising. Prices are now rising far more slowly than in the past couple of years. And while supply chain disruptions really did make it more expensive to produce a lot of goods for a while, the cost to produce them now is rising more slowly than prices, allowing most corporations to keep their profit margins near a 10-year high. They can get away with overcharging you because they have monopoly power. Or so few competitors, they can easily coordinate price increases. If Pepsi and Coca-Cola had lots of competitors, they wouldn't be able to raise prices so high because someone would make cheaper substitutes, and consumers would buy those instead. But Pepsi and Coke own most of the substitutes.
Yeah.
This isn't just happening with Coke and Pepsi. Take meat products. At the end of 2023, Americans were paying at least 30% more for beef, pork, and poultry products than they were in 2020. Why? Near monopoly power. Just 4 companies now control processing of 80% of beef, nearly 70% of pork, and almost 60% of poultry. So, of course, it's easy for them to coordinate price increases. And this goes well beyond the grocery store. In 75% of U.S. industries, fewer companies now control more of their markets than they did 20 years ago. So what can we do? Well, it's largely flown under the media radar, but the Biden administration is taking on this monopolization with the aggressive use of antitrust laws. It's taken action against alleged price fixing in the meat industry, which has been a problem for decades. It's suing Amazon for using its dominance to artificially jack up prices, one of the biggest anti-monopoly lawsuits in a generation. It successfully sued to block the merger of JetBlue and Spirit Airlines.
That is true.
Which would have made consolidation in the airline industry even worse.
Right.
But given how concentrated American industry has become, there's still a long way to go. Inflation is down, but many people don't feel it because prices are still high, and in some cases are still rising because of continued price gouging. This is where you have more power than you might think.
All right, let's hear this.
You might not be able to break up big corporations, but you can keep up the pressure on our government to fight corporate monopoly power. And help spread the truth by sharing this video.
Which, of course, I'll put in the show notes at ronshowytl.com. Anyway, Dr. Reich, again, he just makes a lot of salient and valid points there about why we are where we are. And a lot of this, he talks about how much there's been consolidation in the last 20 years. I mean, it's been going on for more than 50, honestly. And there's no way to just snap a finger and undo it without something radical. We're talking like near revolutionary, and we don't want that. But sometimes it's like pulling the Band-Aid off. You can't just rip the Band-Aid off, or you take a lot of the scabbing and the skin and the hair with it. But there does have to be some sort of a return of some levers in government at the local, state, and federal level to undo the over-monopolization of many of the industries that affect our prices. I say this to folks sometimes in conversation. Sometimes capitalism's best friend is good government regulation to protect itself from itself. That's it for today. Hear the replay 5 to 6 p.m. on America One Radio, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, and then later via podcast. See you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Have a great one.